Alright, welcome to another episode of the Daniel Chia Show. For those of you who are watching From the US, we are having a good Friday evening. For those in Singapore, good morning. Thank you for joining me bright and early here on this Saturday morning. Really excited to have the amazing Tom Scott here today. And before we start and bring Tom on all the way from the US, I'm going to just say hi to some of you who have been here bright and early, right at the start of the show. Hi Jack, nice to see you from Smooth Jazz family. Thank you for being here and sharing a lot of these videos as well with your fan base over there in the US. PG has it been nice to see you. Good morning. And Nicole, good morning from Malaysia. Nice to see you. Hey Eric from Malaysia as well. Good morning, guys. And yeah, thank you for joining me. Let's see. The sound is not good. Let me check. Thank you for letting me know. Let's see what can I do. Test, test. Right. So you guys can let me know whether the volume is good, the video is good. Something wrong with my mic and sound. Let me see. Test, test, test. Is this any better? Let me know, guys. Test my test. Let me know if this sound is better for you all. Test my test. Right, Nicole, maybe you can let me know if the sound is good now. Not better, strong wind sound. That's really weird. Volume of voice is low. Let me do something. Test, my test. Testing 1, 2. Is that any better? Check. My test. Sounds like you got a fan going. It's so weird. I think I know what the problem is. There we go. Is this better? I think this should be a lot better. Tom is frantically um, signaling to me. Okay, I think this should be much, much, much better. I think I know what the problem is. The funny thing is, okay, thank you so much, Adil and Eric and Wendy and Fun111. Wanda, nice to see you all the way from the US. Okay, this is a really rookie mistake. This is probably my 40th live stream episode now. And still things can go wrong. So what accidentally happened was I was taking the sound from my laptop. So it was my laptop mic, and the fan of the laptop is going on and it's picking up that fan sound. So it's so funny. That means I wasn't even talking through this mic. So that's why Scott was telling me earlier. Tom Scott was telling me earlier that the sound is weird. So hopefully it's much better. Everyone's gonna have a better show now. So thank you so much, guys. And that's why, I love these shows. It feels like family. You guys can tell me outright, if the sound can be better. So now I think it's all good. Thank you for that. And yeah, thank you for joining me. Miguel, nice to see you. Hey, guys. Jimmy, nice to see you from the US. And yeah, Nicole, I think I lost track of how many live stream shows I've done already. I think it's closer to 40 now. Wendy, thank you so much. And Wanda, thank you so much. And I'm sure Tom's speaking and playing later would sound great as well. So, um, before we bring Tom on, I want to play for you a clip of him, Tom Scott and the LA Express. The music is, I think that was probably the music that drew me into his playing in the first place. So I definitely want to share it with you guys. And if you're new to Tom's music, I'll be sharing you many links where you can listen to his music, subscribe to his YouTube channel, and check out his website as well. And I'll do that as we go on. Eric says, Eric just found my YouTube channel recently and he's still catching up. I think, Eric, you're like episode 13 or 14, so you have a long way more to catch up. But thank you so much for rewatching all the past episodes. And that's the amazing thing about YouTube. After this live stream, it stays online. So that's the great thing. And so, yeah, I'm gonna start off with this song, and I'm gonna bring it on screen. All right, and here we go.
And gentlemen, put your hands together for Tom Scott and the LA Express with the title track from their latest CD. This is Smokin' Section on Jazz Central.
Okay, sorry guys. Let me check something. It doesn't have audio. Okay, let me try something else. I think this should solve the trick.
Section on Jazz Central.
So that was Tom Scott and the LA Express. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. Incredible music. And I think without further ado, I'm gonna bring on Tom, and let's bring him on the screen here. Hi, Tom.
Hey Daniel, how you doing?
Hey, I'm very good. How's everything over for you in the US right now?
Good, good. I'm getting some double echo here.
Okay, let me see. I think I might know the problem again.
Is your tech guy off tonight, or what's the deal?
It's all me. that's it's so crazy with technology. After so many episodes, still things can be not the
Uh,
way it is, and we just used it last night. Oh man, it's
you
just
know,
so
stuff
hectic.
happens. It's okay. I'm
Yeah.
not now. I'm fine. It's fine now.
Okay. Okay. I
Yeah.
think I know what was the issue. So, you're based in LA right now, right?
Well, yes, I live in a little town called Santa
Mm.
Paula, which is a little bit north of Los Angeles, out of the mainstream, so to speak, in the hills.
Mm.
It's really beautiful,
Ah,
little town.
nice. So, what have you been up to the past few months?
Oh, well, with this virus, it hasn't been easy, of course. Um, but I've been composing. I'm planning a new LA Express record, actually, among other things.
Wow.
Uh, Doing some arranging. I've built up of course, I started my YouTube channel about 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm trying to make that entertaining and as well as kind of informative about stuff I've learned in my life. I think I'm 72 years old, and at this point in my life, I think it's time to pass it on, pass some of my knowledge on for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, I've been watching the videos, and it's just so much, nuggets of wisdom. And that's why I always knew I had to get you on the show, just to learn from all your experiences. I mean, as a saxophonist, I think that's a given. I mean, you're an amazing saxophonist, but I think there's just so much more experience that you have along the way, which we can't wait to dig in as well. And yeah, so since we started off with the LA Express video, so you've had such amazing musicians in the band, over the years. So
That's
you know, what does the band look like for this album?
Well, you know what, the actually on that video you just showed, which was a few years ago, Paul Jackson Jr. was the guitarist, and of
Mm.
course
Yes.
he's like fantastic. I've known
Yeah.
him, good Lord, since the middle '70s, and just I loved him the first moment I heard him. I said, "Let's get that guy." So, so we were just talking the other day. Um, and I said, listen, I'm thinking of doing doing a new LA Express album,
Mm.
and would you be interested? And he was, you know what? I take that back. That the truth is, he brought it up first.
Oh,
I just remember
wow.
this. Yeah, we were talking about teaching. I may do some teaching at USC. He's on the faculty there at
Okay.
University of Southern California,
Mm.
and that's right. So out of the blue, he says, "So when are we going to play with the LA Express again?" And I said, "Well, funny you should ask because I'm just planning some new material." The
Mm.
LA Express is actually kind of an imaginary train, a locomotive train. The first album we did actually had a belt buckle that had a locomotive going down the tracks.
Mm.
So it's the LA Express is sort of like a name for an imaginary train. And after taking off this many years, I decided to call the new record "Back on Track," the LA Express.
Mm. Mm.
And so
Wow.
I've got about, well, I think probably 8 or 9 tunes ready to go. So it's about time
Wow.
to go in the studio in the next, certainly within the next month. I
Wow.
guess we have to wear masks. I don't know how that's going to work, but
Yeah.
I do want to do it with all the people. I don't want to do it like where you play at your house and I
Mm.
play at my house
Mm.
because
Yeah.
what was great about the LA Express and what's great about making music with a group, is the fact that
Mm.
this it's the collective. That there's that old saying, the whole can be greater than the sum of the parts, if you know what I mean.
Yes, definitely. And I think that also, answered a bit of my next question because I've always wondered, did you write everything before you brought it to the studio, or did the band have any input?
I would be lying if I told you I wrote everything. No, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. I write what I hear in my head, and it may
Mm,
not be a complete every part. Like I don't know necessarily what the drums gonna do.
mm,
I
mm,
I kind of I kind of start with a bass figure usually, and then a melody. That's kind of the skeleton of it, and then I fill in some ideas. But a lot of times I'll suggest something, or I'll do a demo. I said, guys, here's a
mm,
demo. Now you can, if you like what I played, you can play it. If you got something better, by all means, go for it.
mm,
So that, and very oftentimes they come up with something better.
that's really,
I don't know everything about how my band should sound, and I
that's,
admit that readily because as I say, that's part of the collective creativity of being with a group. I love that still.
mm. Mm. Do you find that sometimes in the studio, would you guys even, when you get input, do you even like rearrange the tune, or do the band have input in that, or just your part?
Absolutely. I always say to the guys, look, there's no such thing as a bad idea.
Mm,
If you've got if something, if you were inspired to think of something that may make the tune better, tell me, please. I welcome
mm,
it. We'll try it. It may work. It may not. But I want to get everybody's best creative thoughts. Where I learned that from, of course, was Quincy Jones. Of course, I just did this YouTube video
mm.
about Quincy,
Yes.
and watching him work was a beautiful thing. Because he's the one that showed me, he didn't say it, but by his example, that the way you get you hire the best people you can find, and then give them an environment where they can each do what they do best, and
Mm.
that way, that's how you get the great music. You know.
Wow.
I think
Wow.
that's true in any profession, really. I think
Yeah.
that's the way to lead. Get great people, tell them kind of what you're thinking of, and then let them interpret it. Don't say I want it this way and that way, because
Yeah.
you'll handcuff them. Where they
Yeah.
can't express themselves, and that's the last thing I want to do. And Quincy was exactly like that, and I thought this is
Wow.
this is the way to lead.
And I guess that takes a lot of, you having to put down your pride, or, to be able to, as a leader to say, if there's a better
Yeah,
suggestion.
but see,
Yeah.
here's the thing about pride. Pride doesn't always get you the best music. If see, if I did something that was prideful, but the music didn't turn out as good as it might have because I
Mm.
resisted some great idea by somebody over here, that would be dumb. Look, if the music's great, I look like a genius.
Yeah.
I mean, that's honestly the way I feel about it. That's just true. Get the great best people. That's what a producer does. A good one. You get the
Mm.
best people. Give them their room to do what they do. And if it comes out as good as it probably will in that way, you're gonna look like a hero.
Wow, that's really nice to hear from you, and how you've been leading your bands and all these years
Always,
as well.
always.
And wow, that's great. And sometimes I always feel like, when I recorded my first album, it was actually produced by Paul Brown.
Oh, that's
Um,
great. Lovely guy. Great.
yeah, so I always thought, of course, when I went into that studio, I met the guys for the first time, and being in a position where I knew they all knew a lot more than me, so I was very receptive,
Great,
you
great.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
but
lucky
to
you.
hear,
Luck. I always say lucky you, because I always tried to play with people when I was real young, 15, 16, just starting to play in clubs. I always wanted to play with people who were better than me because they would kick my butt and teach me stuff on the spot, how to get better. I wanted to get better. That's the way to get better.
yeah. So, and when I brought some songs to Paul was like, your chorus should be the verse and your verse should be the chorus. I'm like, he's literally flipping my songs upside down. But at that point, I was like, who am I to, to not listen. So, and
Well,
of course, the song turned out way better than,
Well, there you go. See that
Yeah,
because Paul Brown knows something about that. See,
yeah,
and you're
yeah,
young. You're young. You have obviously you have talent, but you could use some refocusing from time to
yeah,
time. By get those experts around you, man, and let them
yeah,
guide you. I've lived my life that way. It's worked out
yeah.
pretty well.
And it's so amazing to hear that, you being you, and you still have that attitude, in the recording, process. So I think
I
that's going to
do.
be a good encouragement for everyone else in how we, lead our bands. And sometimes we are the sessionists, so not all the time we are leading our bands, and it's good to,
No, no.
get a sense
I
both
played on
ways.
hundreds and hundreds of recording sessions,
Mm,
and that is a great a discipline as well as
mm,
the idea of once again the collect. You're part of the collective experience,
mm.
and I learned a lot about it. I do a lot of arranging. I have over the years.
Yeah,
Been pretty successful at it, and part of my education as an arranger was getting hired to sit in a orchestra with, great composers. I was very fortunate being in Hollywood, and I got to work with people like Lalo Schifrin and obviously Quincy and Patrick Williams and Michel Legrand and all these amazing writers. Johnny
mm,
Mandel, who just passed, God bless him. And it's just sitting in my little woodwind section, but I was always listening. What's the French horn doing?
mm,
What are the
mm.
violas doing? And it's just inspiring to be around those people and hear their music as it's being made. I mean,
Mm.
it was just awesome. But see, I didn't have the access that young people have now, thanks
Yeah,
to YouTube and Facebook and other things. So you've got access to some of the all the greatest music as far as you
yeah,
want to go with it. So that's a blessing for you.
for sure. Yeah.
If you
No,
can't, if you can't do what I did, you know what I mean, sit in a great orchestra in Hollywood, that's the next best thing.
yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask, when you started off your career as a saxophonist, was, arranging and, producing, was this something that you knew you wanted to focus on as well, or that creeped in,
Right.
later on?
Well, that's a great question because I always tell the story about when well, first of all, to begin with, I got bit by the music bug very young. My father
Mm,
was a wonderful film and television composer himself. He's not very well known because he never, as good as he was, and people like John Williams, the great John Williams who wrote all the wonderful film scores,
yeah.
recognized my father as a tremendous talent. In fact, hired him
Wow,
to assist him from time to time.
wow.
But my father had no flair for self promotion at all. But he provided me this kind of foundation where I could
Mm,
see. So I decided to play the clarinet in the elementary school, about the fourth grade, I guess. So he bought me a Benny Goodman record from 10 years before I was born,
mhm.
a famous 1938 Carnegie Hall jazz concert with all these famous old guys, Lionel Hampton, Harry James, Teddy Wilson, the pianist, all these great musicians, and I just fell in love with it. And I would sit with my phonograph with that big round thing we used to call a record, an LP. You remember those? I guess they're coming back kind of in some circles, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
I would put that on the record player, and with my clarinet, and I had a music stand and music paper, blank music paper, and so I'd listen to Benny Goodman, and he'd go ba da la la la. I'd grab the needle off the thing, and get my clarinet and go da 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 da. Pick out the notes one at a time and then write them down. So, in a sense, I guess what it call that obsession. I just love doing that. I wanted to get inside of music and explore, particularly
Mm,
jazz music, because that's what I was drawn to in those days.
mm.
So I went from Benny Goodman and the clarinet to Jerry Mulligan, who's actually right behind me, right there. That's me and Jerry Mulligan at the
Wow,
Montreux Jazz Festival in 1970.
wow,
Great baritone sax player and arranger, and I later got to record with him. A thrill of a lifetime.
wow.
And then of course I got into more contemporary jazz like Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley, and we're off to the races. So uh, I guess I was in it from a very early age. And I had what I wanted to tell you. I had a 10-year high school reunion, 10 years after
Okay.
our
Yeah.
graduation, and people came up to me, and I never thought about this actually, but people came up to me and said, "Tom, you were the one who always knew what you wanted to do." Wow, doesn't everyone know what they want to do? No.
That's really interesting, and sometimes on hindsight, when people, observe, you, and then it probably gets a lot clearer, when you heard that, them telling that to you. But yeah, I mean, that's and I'm sure you studied a lot of the jazz tradition. Like how
Yes.
did you? I think there was a good question about style, which maybe I should pull up here. Miguel says, "Hey Tom, greetings from Colombia. What are your musical influences and your musical process?" So I think influences we definitely heard, but aside from the jazz medium, were there a lot of other types of music that you were
Well,
in?
yeah, I was sort of a jazz elitist in my teens. I'll admit to that. But what happened? Well, that's not entirely true because as about 6 or 7 years old, I loved Elvis Presley.
Mm,
He was real big, and this is the 50s, you know.
mm,
So
mm,
I loved him. But then once I got hooked on jazz, that was it for a long time.
mm, mm,
I continued to play classical music in orchestras and things from time to time. So I had to be, I had to learn how to read and other things that weren't necessarily my favorite kind of music. But again, I love getting the experience of all this different stuff. And then I think the next kind of major, well, the Beatles was one thing. Boy, they changed,
mm,
and what they did with pop music, and they did things with songs that just hadn't been done before with the form. And at the same time, R&B exploded with Aretha Franklin and James Brown and
mm,
what's his name? Dance to the music. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Still Sly and the Family Stone, and
mm.
just amazing R&B, and it sort of liberated, in traditional jazz, the bass and drums are they're just accompaniment instruments. The bass is
Yeah,
going doon 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 doon
yeah.
doon, just playing quarter notes like that. And suddenly, and this is how the kind of the LA Express broke out, because we had a band like that, a kind of a straight ahead band at first, but our bass player Max Bennett was also a electric bass player, and a lot of bass players had a terrible time making that transition, because once the electric bass came into popularity in the recording studios, the guys who played the upright basses, they were out. Just like no, their careers went bust.
Oh,
Max was
no.
one of those guys who had played with Kenton and all these other people, but made the successful transition. And he brought in a couple of tunes for our little bebop band at the time, which had a little R&B thing going,
Mm, right.
stuff like that. And we were still playing. That's how the LA Express was formed, because we were still kind of improvising from a kind of jazz point of view, but with this rhythm under this amazing R&B kind of rhythm underneath. Gave it a whole different vibe. And you got to remember, this is 1972. The word fusion, I don't think, had even been invented yet. So,
Mm,
so when we started doing that in this nightclub, the Baked Potato, which is in North Hollywood, it's still there.
mm, mm.
Funky little
Yeah,
place. It's still there. I
yeah.
don't think they've hosed it down in 40 years. But anyway, but I'm very grateful to that place, because that's where this band
Mm,
began, and the crowd. We played for a moderate crowd. It was like a Tuesday. I think I was there every Tuesday night. It was the Tom Scott
mm,
Quintet for a while,
mm.
and we came in every Tuesday night, and we'd play for, anywhere from, I don't know, sometimes only 20, 25, 30 people, whatever. It's a small club.
Yeah, yeah.
Within a few months, I remember driving up to that on that Tuesday night to go to work at that club, and I see a line down the street. This
Wow.
music, because we'd expanded this idea of kind of R&B based jazz, and the audience loved it. And so
Wow.
I thought, gee, this is interesting. What do I know? I mean, I love a lot of different kinds of music, but this really spoke. It allowed me to do what I wanted to do, but it was different. I wasn't just echoing the past. It was kind of a new
Mm,
thing,
yeah.
and for that reason, we gravitated towards that. So uh, I got to tell you, and I listen. I used to get Stravinsky scores like with the Rites of Spring and try to conduct them as a kid. So I sort of was into everything. But as I say, jazz was my main focus. And then once this kind of jazz R&B fusion thing happened, I was all into that.
So from the baked potato shows, did that give you the idea to, okay, maybe now is a good time to record the band, since the
Well,
first.
I wish I'd been had that much command of my life. No, what happened was we had befriended a sound engineer and a recording engineer at A&M Studios. A&M Studios in the '70s was the hottest boy. It was like one, two, three, four recording rooms. A big one and a couple of medium ones and a small one. Um, and you'd walk. I used to do a lot of sessions, and they were at A&M because it was so popular. And you'd walk into that down the hall there, and there'd be Billy Preston and over here, and the Carpenters over here,
Wow.
and Quincy Jones over here, and Captain and Tennille over here, and I mean, it was a real hotbed of activity. So, why did I bring that up? Oh, so this engineer from A&M, Hank Sicalo, came into the club to see us, and he was obviously very taken with the band, and he said, "Listen, why don't there's some downtime on the weekends at A&M Studio. Why don't you guys come in and we'll just record and maybe we can get you a deal."
Wow.
He had a good relationship with Lou Adler at Ode Records, which was part of A&M, and Lou Adler was an incredibly successful producer, having produced Jan and Dean, Carole King, Tapestry, of one of the a huge selling album, and Cheech and Chong, and a whole bunch of other acts. So the idea of getting with Lou Adler was a very, very attractive
Mm,
thing.
mm,
So, but we went in and made the record without a record deal. And then Lou heard it and he said, "Okay, I want it." And that's how it started.
And I think the first two albums you did with
That's
them,
right.
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
The LA Express.
That's,
Well, yeah, it was Tom Scott and the LA Express, and then the other guys in the band, primarily Max Bennett and John Guerin, the bass player and drummer, who were
mm,
both no longer with us. But in any case, after those two albums, they came to me and they said they wanted to take my name off the main credits and make it just the LA Express. And honest to God, I just wanted to play in a great band. I didn't really. It was nice to have my name on it, but it certainly wasn't. If they didn't want it, it's fine. Let's
mm,
try it that way. So I
yeah.
waltzed into Lou Adler's office, and I said to him, because I had already been signed to him as a solo artist, and then the LA Express happened. So they weren't
Mm,
officially signed to Lou Adler. Just me. So I said, "Look, Lou, for
mm.
the next album, we'd like to. I've talked to the guys, and they just want to make it the LA Express." And Lou Adler says to me, "Tom, I don't think so." "You don't think so? Why not?" He says, "Listen." He says, "I don't think. First of all, I don't think you should submerge yourself in a band. I think you have other things in your life to go on to. This is just a moment in your life. Um, and the other thing is, I listen. I want to work with you. I'm not particularly interested in working and dealing with them. That's just not something that's attractive to me." So I had to go back to them and say it's not happening. And oh my gosh, it was a scene, a bad scene. But eventually, the L.A. Express went on and made some records without me, two or three of them, for another label, and that was the end of that. So I went on and went to New York, did New York Connection, a bunch of albums with the New York guys, Steve Gadd and Ralph McDonald, Eric Gale, Bob James. Oh God, what a joy that was! so
Wow.
so
Wow.
that's what happened.
So you already had solo albums at the same time as the LA Express albums, or
Prior to the LA Express, I had two, four, five solo albums. Yes, two for
Mm,
Bob Thiel, who was the guy that founded Impulse Records, which is the great jazz label that all of John
yeah,
Coltrane's later work,
yeah.
and Mingus and Eric Dolphy and all this stuff. And he asked me to join his label after hearing
Mm,
me one night with the Oliver Nelson Big Band in Los Angeles.
wow.
So
That's
yeah, I was already on my way.
Mm, mm. So, I was watching, I think this was a year or two ago, and I was watching a Joni Mitchell documentary.
Yes.
And only then I realized that there was so much, connections between you and her. Was it the LA Express that was opening for her?
Yes, yes. Well, here's what happened. Just the same way the engineer Hank from A&M came and heard us and wanted to record us, Joni Mitchell walked in one night. Now, I had already worked with her, and I'll tell you this story too. This story involves Quincy Jones, as I said before. I mentioned him before, and I mentioned this in my video. Um, Quincy in 1970, I had met him for a couple of years, and he liked me, and he thought I had potential. He formed a record label and wanted me to be the first of two solo artists on that label. It was called Symbolic Records, and the record company never came through. It was fulfilled. However, we did go in the studio and do a couple of basic tracks in preparation for this album that never came to be. And I was discussing material with Quincy, and Quincy says to me, "Tom, have you ever heard the tune Woodstock?" And I said, "You mean the tune that Crosby, Stills, and Nash sing at the beginning of the Woodstock movie?" And he says to me, "Well, that's the tune, but have you ever heard the original by the singer, songwriter, composer, the original version?" I said, "No." Who's that?" He says, "Joni Mitchell." I said, "Joni Mitchell, I've heard of her." But in my ignorance, I thought she was like another kind of folk singer songwriter, like maybe Joan Baez or Judy Collins. I kind of lumped them all together. And but as I say, so I did a version of Woodstock playing the soprano recorder, and then the record company fell through, and it turned to, for a while, it was just a very expensive demo. but then Herb Alpert signed me. That was the fifth solo album that I had been signed to do for A&M, and I recorded that version of Woodstock. I re-recorded it on that album because I thought it turned out real nicely, and it was a good track. So I forgot all. The album came out a couple years later. I get a call once again from another A&M engineer, Henry Louie, who was kind of Joni Mitchell's exclusive engineer. He worked there full time with her mostly. And he says to me, "Tom, Joni Mitchell has heard your version of Woodstock, and she wants to know if you would be willing to play on the record she's making right now," which was at that time was a record called For the Roses. I said, "Sure." So I showed up, and we had what I consider to be just a joyous musical kind of, I don't know. She's described it as a ping pong match where, first of all, I came in and listened to these tracks she had made, and she comes in and writes these amazing songs with these unbelievable lyrics, and she tunes guitars. She has like a bunch of different guitar tunings, and she just will come up with a weird tuning and then a few chords based on that tuning, and then write a song around it. Unbelievable. Or she'll sit at the piano. She plays these real, I must say, like almost jazz chords, has no idea what they are. It's all ear with her. It's all instinct. And she's just amazing. So I came in and worked on this record, and we had this dialogue going, and she would say, "I'd like a little burst of something over here, some woodwinds," and it was just so much fun. And I did that for a week or more, a week and a half, evenings. And so that was fun, and we had a great rapport. For the Roses came out. Now, right around that time, then the LA Express began and became big. So one night, unbeknownst to me, Joni Mitchell walks in the door. She must have heard about the band.
Mm.
And she's sitting there, and she says, "Tom, I'm about to start on a new record." And she says, "I like your band." She says, "I've never recorded with a full band before." And I wasn't familiar with all her work, but I figured at some point she must have worked with a band. But no, every record she ever made, she would come in and record herself singing, and accompanying herself either on the keyboard or the guitar or the dulcimer or whatever. Her rhythm was, thank God, was really, really good, because then she would bring in a bass player and have him overdub, send him home, bring in a drummer, have him overdub, sent him home. So her records that had other musicians were all like these kind of composite, layered things. So she didn't know what it was like to play with a band. So I said, I'm sure I can talk my guys into it. And we agreed. And Joni gave me a reel-to-reel tape of those in those days of the tunes that we were to do on the record that became Court and Spark. And it was just great fun doing that with her. She was, just like I was. She was truly excited at the idea of these people all creating and adding their thoughts, musical thoughts, into her music. And it was just a great marriage. The record came out in January of 1974. We were set to go on tour with her as her opening act, and accompanied her during part of her show. And it was supposed to be a 6-week, I think, college tour, January, February, March, maybe. College auditoriums, maybe a couple of, 1,500-seater type places. The album went on the charts and wouldn't leave. It stayed there and stayed there. So the tour kept being extended, bigger and bigger. Now it's summertime, and we're doing arenas.
Wow.
I remember we were in Boston Garden, which is a famous arena there, and we got there a day early. And it turns out that Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young were in the auditorium the night before us, and I got to sit on right on the side of the stage and listen to their amazing concert. Boy, those four guys, what music they made. And then, we were like, Joni Mitchell and Tom Scott and the LA Express. We did a whole bunch of summer big tours, indoor, outdoor, culminating in, I think it was September or October maybe, Wembley Stadium in England. 100,000 people. Crosby, Stills and Nash, the band, Bob Dylan, I think, was on it. Anyway, an amazing superstar rock concert. Quite surreal, I must say. So it was the whole Joni Mitchell experience was great. And of course, for that record, Court and Spark, I won my first Grammy Award for Best Arrangement Accompanying a Vocalist.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's so interesting that Joni Mitchell was cool with, the LA Express being the opening act. So you guys still played your material, because I would think, fans who who knew Joni Mitchell's music and then
Well,
they come to the show.
Well, yeah, I think some of them indulged us. I think, that's always the case. Jimmy Buffett happens to be a friend of mine. And he told a story one night. He says, people don't know, I used to be other people's opening act. And they used to throw stuff at me. Get off. Get off. We want to hear, whoever it was, whoever the
Yeah.
headliner was.
Yeah.
Nobody ever did that with us, thank God. I think Joni has a bit more of a tasteful audience that way, not so rowdy. But I think we kind of won them over by the end of the evening because, we were integrated into Joni's music. And of course, by that time, the album was out. So our sound they were something that they were used to by that time,
So you guys wouldn't so she'll have another full band playing her set, or it was just
Well,
her?
no. What happened was we did our 35-minute set with the L Express. Then she came out alone and would do her thing like she always does, alone. And I got to tell you, how many concerts did we do that year? 45, 50, I don't really know. In all that time, and I'm off stage as she's, because I was really intense on being there for her. I never heard her flub a chord, a lyric, a vocal note. She was perfect. I mean, unbelievable. And those songs are hard, those are very wordy songs. She never forgot a lyric, never stumbled, and never, all her piano and guitar. And, of course, she had a couple of guys frantically tuning guitars off stage, for her next tune because she had all these weird tunings. But she just never flubbed, man. She was a real inspiring performer. And, when you go out on stage with somebody like that, you go, I got to play, you can't fluff it off. Not that I would anyway, but she gives you this extra impetus to just be super good, And it
Oh,
was great, and that was a great discipline for me. Everything has the potential to help you grow in some way. You got to look at it that way. What can I learn from this experience? Even things that may not necessarily be fun or interesting. Keep asking yourself, what can I take away from this thing? Because that makes that time you've spent worthwhile, rather than just kind of, oh God, I'm just waiting. When is it going to be over?
yeah, for sure. And so you guys would come back on to play some full band
Oh,
tune.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. So right, if I
Oh
left you there in
no.
a bit. So yeah, so then we would join her for the I guess the last third of the show, which was all the stuff from Court and Spark, basically. Yeah,
Wow.
it was a hell of a show, and she was just people just adored her. Understandably, I mean she's amazing, and she's still around, and I still admire her so much. She's an amazing painter, lyricist, singer, musician, composer, all those things.
That's amazing. And I think in the documentary that I watched, I don't know, or maybe it was another video that you've had a long relationship with George Harrison as well. Um,
Yes, I have. I had.
how
Yes.
did that, you know,
Well, okay. Well, okay. That's another story. That's my next YouTube video, but I might as well.
oh, just a
I'll
short one.
premiere it right here for
Yeah.
you, Daniel, for you and your listeners. Um, okay. So we would think that I would have met George Harrison somehow in the recording pop, session, something like that. That's not at all what happened, because in my last year of high school, between 11th and 12th grade, in the summer, I was going to school in the San Fernando Valley here in Los Angeles. UCLA offered a couple of courses, summer courses, that I wanted to take, and they were taught by a guy named Don Ellis, who was a kind of an avant-garde composer, trumpet player from back east. He'd come to join the UCLA faculty, and these classes were in the evening, back to back, 2 or 3 times a week. One was a jazz improvisation, and one was jazz arranging and composing. So I drove over the hill to UCLA to these classes, and found out that among his other things that he was teaching us, he was very much interested in odd meter rhythms, odd times, and particularly as played by these East Indian musicians. There was one on the faculty, a gentleman named Hari Har Rao, um, who was on the ethnomusicology department. He had studied sitar and tabla and rhythm in India, in Calcutta, and once he became an adult, he came over to Los Angeles to live and promote Indian music, and ended up on the faculty at UCLA. So Don Ellis and this guy got together and formed a group with some other LA musicians, called, I was 16, 17 at the time. I was not in that band yet. I was too young. They called it the Hindustani Jazz Sextet. Really, up until that time, the most famous odd meter tune was, of course, Take Five, Dave Brubeck. But jazz was not really into that much into odd meters. They were barely into waltzes, for God's sakes. So things beyond that were kind of very unusual. So they were experimenting with that, and I found that to be fascinating. I thought, this is a really interesting thing, and this might, do something to my musicianship and my playing that might give me something distinctive, right? You want to be, I don't want to just try to be Cannonball Adderley or John Coltrane all my life. You want to try and establish something new. So I ended up, after this course was over, I ended up taking private lessons on the tabla drums, that pair of Indian
Yeah,
drums,
yeah.
for a year with Hari Har Rao, this guy. And I still have the notebooks full of rhythm patterns and all that stuff. It was really a wonderful and very, you know, musically expanding experience. So, I know this is a long story, but we have
No,
time,
no.
right?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So, uh, so the next thing that happened was that I got a call from a motion picture producer I happen to know, and he said, "Tom, Ravi Shankar was in fact Hari Har Rao's teacher in India, And what had happened in the interim period was, of course, the Beatles, as I was busy taking tabla lessons and not thinking about much else, the Beatles, George Harrison in particular, had gone over to India and studied sitar with Ravi Shankar. And of course, everything the Beatles did was worldwide news. So immediately, the headlines began to be written about Ravi Shankar, this man who was an unbelievable musician in that area of classical Indian music, which is another world. And I wasn't prepared to get into that, but the rhythm part I loved, and that's something I thought I could apply to my jazz playing. So that's why I studied rhythm, the tabla. Anyway, George was over there, and so Ravi became a star, a bit of a superstar, really. I get this call from this producer, and he says, "Listen, Ravi Shankar is coming over to Los Angeles to compose a film score for a movie." And actually, it's a movie that won the. Was called Charlie, with an actor starring an actor named Cliff Robertson, who actually won the Best Actor Oscar for his performance in that movie later on. However, this producer says to me, Ravi has said to his buddy Hari Harao that he wants to surround himself, rather than traditional Hollywood studio musicians, a smaller group of people who may be acquainted with Indian music to some degree. My name was on the list. So he says, "Do you want to play a movie score with Ravi Shankar?" Let me think. Do I? Yeah, I think I do. So I showed up at this motion picture studio for a week, met Ravi Shankar. He was absolutely awesome. Funny, hip. He was aware of Western culture. He'd actually grown up in Paris. His father was a diplomat from India to France. And so he was very worldly and great. Just so cool, funny, and warm and friendly. So that was great. So the next thing that happens, now we go to George Harrison's history. The Beatles broke up, right? And so they all were pursuing their separate careers. George wanted to desperately to leave Capitol, EMI Records. He felt that they'd really screwed the Beatles over. And I think you could probably make that case because they made so much money compared to what the Beatles made off those amazing records. But he was still contractually obligated for another 3 records on EMI. But the one thing he could do on his own, without anybody bugging him about contracts, was produce other people. So he went to, where else? The A&M studio lot, took an office there along with Lou Adler and the A&M people, And he took another office there and formed a record company called Dark Horse Records. In the press, he was often referred to as the Dark Horse Beatle, so he just kind of went with that and called it Dark Horse. The first record that he chose to produce was a thing called Ravi Shankar Family and Friends. And I was one of the friends. And so there we are at A&M studio with all these guys, a bunch of these people, and some also East Indian musicians came over for the project as well. Amazing instrumentalists, my Lord. And so there we all are, and we start to rehearse with Ravi some of this music, and then and I look in the booth, and behind the glass, and there's George Harrison, the Beatle. Oh my God, how cool is this? So we get to our first 10-minute break. He must have heard about me, that I was a student of Indian music, because he came out of the door and right up to me and said, "You're Tom Scott, right? Yeah. You're into Indian music, right?" I said, "Yeah." "Do you like to listen to it?" I said, "Sure." He says, "Come with me." And from that day, I became kind of George's sidekick and best friend for that was 72, about 3-4 years, 5 years. I mean, I know he had other friends, obviously, but I lived at Friar Park a lot. I worked on 3 of his records over there, and he was a constant companion, or I was his constant companion for a lot of time. And he was just one delightful, self-effacing, no ego. He was like, "I'm okay." I said, "George," I loved his guitar playing always. He was one of those people, there's Jaco Pastorius and there's different people who, when they play like 1 or 2 notes on their instrument, you know exactly who it is. George Harrison was one of those guys. And let's face it, A guitar is a piece of wire stretched across a piece of wood. I mean, how can you sound so uniquely individual? But he did. And but he didn't play a complicated. He wasn't a jazz guy, but it was so beautiful. The music that's what his choices musically were just great. And I actually said to him, George, you're. I had to like tell him how good he was because he was like, I'm okay. Isn't that funny?
Wow.
But and so we had a wonderful relationship, and so he played on when came to L.A. and played on one of my records, New York Connection. Played one song,
Wow.
and we stayed in touch for a while. Then, of course, I was there when he fell in love long distance with who was the secretary at Los Angeles while we were in England. He would call her. He was our Dark Horse secretary, and he'd hang up the phone and say, "Gosh, there's something about her I really like." I'd go, "George, you don't even know her." Well, of course, it was Olivia who became his wife for
Wow.
the rest of his days, and she's a
Wow.
delightful. I've talked to her, in the last year or so, and she's
Wow.
delightful and was a wonderful. They were a wonderful couple, those two.
Wow. And who would think, learning tabla and Indian rhythms would.
Exactly. See, this is okay. So there's a lesson here for you kids, all you guys out there who want to know, the word from Tom Scott. I can tell you, look, take advantage of the opportunities that come your way because you never know where they'll lead you. But if don't shine them, don't fart them off because you think, oh, this is just like baloney. No, not necessarily. It could be, in my case, like just because I wanted to study some rhythm, turned into a life-changing and career-altering experience.
Yeah.
It makes me laugh even now.
Wow. That's
There's
so.
an old joke, which is, how to make God laugh, and the answer is tell him your plans, because God will go, that's very interesting, but no, that's
Yeah.
not what you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing this over here.
So crazy. And I saw we had Jeff Kashiwa here, we had Steve Cole, amazing musicians. Jeff
Oh
was
yeah,
actually here just last week on the show, and he has a question. He says he
Jeff
wants to
does.
hear. Yeah, he says he
Hi,
wants to.
Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for being with us here. And he says he wanted to hear your story about recording your iconic soprano solo on Paul McCartney and
Listen
Wings
to what
Lip
the man
to
said.
what the
Yeah,
band said.
yeah.
So, how
Well,
did you start, being like, I'm, just doing so much session work in the studio and then
look,
leading?
that you're right. That's a great question, and I think the answer is I made good. I did have an advantage in the sense that my father, as I said, was in the music industry, was a well-known film composer, which got helped get me in the door. But really, I had help from some of the musicians that I played with at clubs. Dave Grusin, who became a famous, iconic film score guy. He was the guy who actually helped me get sessions. Quincy helped me. These people kind of shepherded my help shepherd me. But the Paul McCartney story is as follows. I was sitting at this now. What year was that? 76, 75, something like that. I was sitting at home. I was living in the San Fernando Valley, and the phone rang one afternoon, and it was a recording engineer from Wally Heider's studio, which was an old studio in Hollywood, off of Cahuenga Boulevard in Hollywood Boulevard, and he says to me that Paul McCartney's in town and he's recording a tune, and he's interested in having a saxophone solo, and he thought he'd check with you. I said, well, that's great. I don't had I met him yet. I may have met him at some point on the George Harrison tour. It's not clear whether I knew him by that time or not. Anyway, he apparently knew who I was, so I said, sure, I'd delighted to play on anything he wants me to. When do you want me to come in? He says, what are you doing right now? I said, well, I guess I'm on my way into Wally Heider's recording studio. So
Wow.
and he said he said it was soprano sax. So I drove on down there, and walked in the door, and that's one of those places where you walk in the door and the booth, the all the console and everything is right there, like in your face as you walk in, and then the actual glass, the studio where the microphones are, that's like through another door. So I walk in, and he had some worshipers with him. I remember that. Some celebrity worshipers. What's his name? Ty Yellow. Tony Orlando was there, and a couple of the monkeys were there, just kind of worshiping. So I walk in, and and I say hi to Paul. He was, he's very cordial. He's really a very gentlemanly guy, and he said, "Yeah, we got this tune we want you to play on." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll go in the uh, room there and get my horn out, and he says, put your phones on, and while you're warming up, we'll play a tune for you." So I walk in there, and as a little side note, I walk in, and there is Linda McCartney sitting at a piano. Now, she took a lot of heat on when she was part of Paul's band, because she wasn't really a great musician. She was okay, and but she was so nice. I've always, and if I hear her name spoken in a disparaging way, I always defend her, because first of all, I walk in there, she doesn't know me, I'm a stranger. She says, "Hi, how are you? Listen, I'm working on one of my tunes for the tour. Listen, Paul, I don't really want to be in the band, but Paul wants me to do it, so I'm trying to get better." And you see this little part right here, and she actually played me a little part of, I don't know what tune, Rocky Raccoon or something, I don't remember now. But just the fact that she'd share that with me, I thought that was so sweet.
Hmm.
Who the hell am I? But so she left the room, and I get my horn out, and there's the microphone right there. So I'm kind of, just warming a few notes. Got the headphones on, and the tune comes on. And I find out it's in G, and a pretty simple key, right? Fairly straightforward. And I just kind of start reacting along with it. And I remember that, there's that part that goes da 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 da, and I'd answer a little something da da da, da 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 da, and then it got to this section, and again, I never heard the tune before, so you can hear what you can hear on what turns out to be the solo set, the solo in the middle. There's like 2 or 3 beats where there's nothing going on. And it's because I'm just listening. I go, "Oh, I guess there's a solo. I better jump in here." And then there's a slow part at the end, and I sort of guessed at what the chords would be, and I sort of played something. And I've got my eyes closed all this time, of course. And I get to the end of the tune, and I open my eyes, and the tape stops, and everybody's applauding in the booth. And I go, "Wait a minute! I never heard I just was, learning it. Could I take another shot at it? I'd like another shot." Of course, which take do you think went on the record?
The very one.
Yeah, the very first one, yeah. So it was just instinct guiding me, and I got lucky. I mean, I tell you what, I wasn't thinking much. You start. Sometimes this is a bad thing. Just respond. Duke Ellington used to say, "I don't like to do more than 2 takes of anything," because by that time now you're starting to think, and you should just use your emotions and your creativity to just let it breathe, and that's what happened here, and it just had a nice kind of up vibe to it, and they loved it. So there you
Wow.
go.
Does that happen often? Like, when the artist doesn't give you like a chord chart or notes and just, plays you plays you the tune and lets you do what you do. Is that normal?
Happens all the time. It's a 50-50. I don't know what some people don't have any chord charts. They're songwriters, and they come up with the tunes, and maybe they have a band that comes in and learns it all, and there's no existing chord chart. So sometimes I got to write out one so I know what's going on.
Mm.
Sometimes if it's fairly simple, straightforward, I won't have to. Sometimes usually the chord charts are in a concert, so well, that's another thing you got to learn if you're a saxophone player, especially. You got to learn to transpose to your instrument, which of course is
Mm,
not they're either B flat or E flat instruments,
mm,
saxophones. So you just got to be prepared for whatever it is.
mm.
And so there, yeah, that was one of those. Obviously, the Paul McCartney thing. There was nothing. There was no music at all.
Wow, wow, very interesting. And I think we have a question here that I just saw from Adil. He asked if you could share more about Dave Grusin and your
Uh,
relationship. And you were with the GRP big band.
All
Uh
Stars, yeah,
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 that's
yeah.
so how was that experience,
Well, it was
working?
great. Oh God, it was awesome, awesome. Because all those people together, Chick and Chick Corea and wow, Dave Weckl and oh my God, and the sax section was Bob Mincer and Ernie Watts and oh my Lord, it was just awesome. Arturo play. Oh no, he did a tour with us, but anyway, the whole band was just awesome. And Dave, I wrote a couple of charts. We kind of split up the writing of the charts. Russell Ferrante also wrote a couple of great charts. And Dave, of course, being the G of GRP Records, was hands on involved in that. And he was a very almost shy kind of guy. He wasn't real, you know. He didn't have a real exuberant personality, but boy, when he sat down at that piano, or when you started playing his music, I did a lot of recording sessions with him because he did a bunch of TV movie back in those days in the 70s. They had TV movies. They were kind of movies made specifically for TV. Universal Studios in particular used to do a lot of those, and Dave did several of them. And what he used oftentimes was smaller groups, like usually like three woodwinds. I'd be one of the flutes. Me and Bud Shank, awesome flute player. Gene Cipriano on oboe, and then a harp and a couple of keyboards and four or five percussion, kind of chamber group. And boy, the stuff he wrote for that, oh God, just fantastic. Not to mention, of course, his larger ensemble film scores like Golden Pond. Oh, well, that he has a record called Cinemagic, which is a lot of all that best of that stuff, and also I loved a tune that he wrote for 3 Days of the Condor. It was kind of the love theme between Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway. Um, I don't, Kathy's tune it was called, and it's a beauty. I mean, I can't say enough good things about Dave Grusin. Also, he got me a couple of writing gigs. I wrote a lot of the music for Beretta. He wrote the theme, but then he went on to do other things, and I wrote the underscore for all 2.5, 3 years of Beretta episodes, all by myself. So that was it. He's been a great friend and a real mensch to me.
And that's definitely the other thing I want to ask you about was how do you get started with the film and television scoring?
Well, you got to be around. I think that's what happened for me, and I had something a little different to offer. I was a kind of one of the young guys with a sort of a I don't know, a pop rock jazz attitude, and it was kind of different when there weren't too many of us when I first came on the scene. The people who did the jazz solos on saxophone were guys like Plas Johnson, unbelievable, and the great guys, but they were about like a kind of a generation before me, and
Mm,
so I was kind of part of the modern group, and a film composer like everybody else, like they want as many different colors as they can muster, and they want to add certainly in those days they wanted to add a kind of more contemporary element to what was traditional film scoring, you know. So I was part of that. I lucked out, but I don't know that now. Of course, it's so different. I don't even know what to say. Uh, so much of it is done. Let's put it this way. In Los Angeles, anyway, I don't know what it's like in other places. In Los Angeles, there are far more qualified musicians than there is work to keep them busy. So these days, I think you've got to kind of do your own thing. Get known through the internet, through social media. I think that's where it's at now.
mm, mm. Yeah. That's and I'm sure, it's not something, the skills required to do, film and TV scores. It's not something that, you really learn in school studying or anything. So did you feel like when you got your first, projects, was it a huge learning curve, coming from a
It was I was
musician?
I was flying by the seat of my pants. I was hoping they wouldn't throw me out on my ass.
Uh, So a lot of
but but
learning on the
but I
go.
realized the reason I figured, well, the reason I'm here is because they want me to do kind of what I was doing in the clubs, sort of a contemporary feel, kind of maybe I did know a bit of dramatic underscore. I had spent some time studying
Mm,
that. So of course my father, I happen to, I didn't study with him, but growing up in the household where he was always in a room with an upright piano playing these wonderful dramatic uh, sophisticated harmonies. I
mm,
had that sound in my head, so I could kind of mix that. Look, it's funny. I think that my success was partly due to the fact that I just listened to every damn thing I could every thought that I thought was good, and
mm.
listened to it and tried to analyze it and absorb it. Absorb it. Sometimes you can absorb things without even knowing it. Just expose yourself to this stuff.
Mm.
That. So I think if any, I was way young and way inexperienced, but I had enough. I had absorbed enough of the elements that went into the scoring to be able to kind of get the hang of it.
That's definitely awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And I have a question here from Roxy from the Philippines. She asked, any advice for players who want to step out of being submerged in bands and do their own thing?
Any advice? Well, if you want it, first of all, you gotta realize that in doing that, you are putting yourself out there in competition with anybody else who does what you do, and so you've gotta say, well, what is my competition? What are my chances of being successful at it? And if you ask yourself that question, and at the end you go, okay, I think I can compete, with the best of whatever you do, go for it. But it's listen, being a leader is not just standing up in front of a band. There's phone calls. You got to get the band first of all. You got to get them in a room together, which that sometimes could be the most challenging thing of all. Uh, I did a record called Cannon Reloaded, which was a tribute to Cannonball Adderley, but we had some unbelievable musicians: Marcus Miller, Steve Gadd, George Duke, um, uh, 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 no, I can't remember that. I forgot the name of the great trumpet player. Not Winton, but the other guy who writes film scores. Anyway, just finding a date where they were all available. That was the hardest part. once once we once we got in the room, the rest was fine. But as a leader, you've got organizational things. You've got to do a library. What are we going to play? Are you a composer, or do you play cover versions of other people's tunes? And you're responsible for all that. So it's a big undertaking. Um, be sure that you're ready to take all that on.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Tom, for answering that. And definitely not the easiest thing, for
No,
people who start off as a
if it
band.
was, if it was, everybody'd be doing it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I guess we must want it enough because,
Yes.
and even now in this day and age, sometimes people ask me like, oh, when you go on tour, do you have a tour manager? Do you have a booking agent and all? And when I started out, and it was all me, doing the emails, the venues, the
Me
flights,
too.
the transportation,
Oh God, that's right. That's
and the
right.
playing is the easiest part, once we once we start the show, but everything else, and sometimes that's why I really love being a sessionist once in a while. I love doing my own thing. But last year I was playing a concert in Taiwan, and it was a busy period in December. In Singapore here we have tons of gigs towards the year, and I was so happy to just be out, be in the band. Everyone is just
Uh,
telling me what time to be where,
that's
and the
right.
food is
Isn't
there
that
ready
joy?
for me.
That's joyous, man.
Oh
Oh
man.
God, I don't have to do all that other stuff. Oh, joy. Just
So
play. I
yeah.
love it. I love it. I know
Yeah.
what you mean. That's right.
So that
And that person who asked about stepping out and doing
yeah.
all that, if you do step out and try to do that, there'll be I predict there'll be a point at which you'll go, oh gosh, can I just be in a band again? Somebody else's band.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And if you, as again, if you have the desire, if you want it so bad, you got to want it bad because this reality is there's a tremendous amount of competition, and a lot of people want to be doing that, and it's a lot of work and a lot of competition. So, good
Yeah.
luck. Hey, I wish you well, honestly.
Mhm. Yeah. And we have a question here from Russell. Russell's asked, were you hooked up with the other Laurel Canyon clique besides Joni?
No, I wasn't. And again, I did live in Laurel Canyon in 1967. I moved into Laurel Canyon, a beautiful house. I wish I'd held on to it. God, I can't imagine what it'd be worth now. But life had other things in mind for me. Uh, no, they were apparently. I've learned since that they were a bunch of them were there. The Crosby, Stills and Nash, and I did know the guy from the Turtles, Mark Volman. He lived a couple doors down from me, and I saw him from time to time. And the singer songwriter diminutive gentleman named Paul Williams. Do you know who that is? He was a couple of yeah. He's now the president of ASCAP. So
Wow.
there were a few people there, but no, I was not part of that scene then.
Mm,
It was later, much later. Well, much later. It was 4 or 5 years later.
mm, mm. And Tom, there's one big part of you as a person that we haven't touched about, which is being a music director for huge shows, on TV, especially Academy Awards, the Emmys, and I remember I think was you were with the MD for the Pat Sajak band or so,
That's
and I
correct.
think was Dave Koz in that.
Yes, I always like to say that I brought Dave up from a puppy, from a very young. No,
Wow.
listen, someone at CBS, where that was the network that had this show, the Pat Sajak show. I was trying to get, I had my friends. I tried to get some people who were not available. I ended up with a real good band anyway. But I knew that I had a one extra chair, and I wanted somebody younger than somebody younger than me, because all the guys. And I tried to get some women in the band, and the ones I wanted weren't available. They were too busy. Patrice Rushen, great pianist, was one of them,
Mm,
and she
yeah.
couldn't do it. Um, but I wanted to somebody youthful to bring to the table. So saw a tape of this guy. He was with Richard Marx. Do you know Richard Marx?
Yes.
He was with that Richard Marx back in those days. He was young and had hair about to here,
Yeah.
big thing. And but the playing I heard on this videotape, I said that guy, that's the guy I want. And I sought him out, and we stood side by side for a year and a half on that show, and it was great. He was great. I love Dave tremendously. He's a wonderful guy, and boy, hasn't he done well for himself since
Yeah,
you know, since he left the
definitely.
show. He's done pretty well.
So what were some of the, responsibilities and experiences from, doing a Academy Award show, being the MD for the entire band? I'm sure there's a lot of music to learn, a lot
Sure.
of
Yeah.
performances.
Yeah. In an average award show, I was music director for the Emmys, the Emmy Awards, which are the television,
Mm,
version of the Oscars.
yeah.
I think about 10 or 11 times years, and I did the Oscars once. The reason I did it was because Quincy Jones was the actual producer of the entire event, and he asked
Mm,
me if I would lead the orchestra, and of course I said
wow.
sure. Um, the job is, first of all, the good news about it is you once all the music, you got to prepare. There's a lot of preparation, of course, pre-production, as we say. Um, Arrangements have to be written for all the nominated shows of their themes, and also there's a bunch of incidental music. When they say, "And please now welcome to the stage so and so," you gotta hit
Mm,
play some music. So
yeah.
some of those things are what we call generic play-ons. They're stuff original stuff that you write just to get somebody on a stage
Yeah.
and cut it off once they start talking. And so, in an average 3-hour award show, which is what those usually are, there's about 125 pieces of music, believe it or not, played. during that time. So a lot of them they're only like 5 seconds, 6 seconds, but the book is very thick. Let's put it that
Wow.
way. But what I was going to say, the good thing about it is you have a run through rehearsal, then you have another rehearsal, and then you have a dress rehearsal. So by the time you've done all that, whatever problems could have come up will have come up already, and you fix them. So by the time you go on the air, you pretty
Mm,
well got it under your belt. And of
mm,
course, still got to be I wear headsets like this with one of those things where I can step on a button and talk to the orchestra if I have to, or talk to another button, a foot pedal.
yeah.
I talk to the producer if I've got a question. But as I say, by the time we're on the air, it's pretty cut and dried. We just go through the
Mm,
show, play our 125 pieces of music, and go home.
wow. Would you usually play the saxophone yourself or just, you
No,
know,
no, no. I'm
take
conducting.
okay.
I'm conducting. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, and for the musicians, do you usually get your pick, as
You
the
bet.
MC?
You bet I do. You bet. That's the good thing. Lucky for me that I spent so much time in playing with, in other people's bands. I knew who all the players were that I wanted. I listened very carefully as over the years, and not only great players, but not good people, people who were, as
Mm,
that old phrase, plays well with others. But musicians generally do anyway. I mean, that's what we have to do. We have
yeah.
to play well with others.
Mm,
So I always assembled orchestras or bands, whatever they were, that I was extremely proud of, and just delighted to be there with them. Because
mm.
the sound, a bunch of great musicians, there's no thrill like having a bunch of great musicians play your music. Oh my Lord, what a thrill! It's a high I can't describe.
Amazing. Tom, this is the first time, I've had the privilege of having, great guests come on board, many, many other saxophonists as well. And a lot of the times, with the audience, they'll be asking a lot of saxophone related questions,
Sure, sure.
gear and stuff. But, this is the first time and it's almost 90 minutes now and not a
Oh,
single
is
person
it? Oh my
asked
Lord.
about a reed or mouthpiece or anything, which to me it goes to show, like you are so much more than just a saxophonist, and that's why I knew I had to get you on. Like I said, being a great saxophonist, that's a given. But and even in the comments, I can see people are asking about your experiences, and not so much what size reed you're playing,
Yeah.
but just to indulge those who are saxophonist here. And because I saw a question of Adil asking any chance for a tune, Tom. So we were talking about that before, and I'm not sure if you have any backing tracks set up.
I don't have any here.
Mm, no
Uh,
problem. But Tom
yeah,
has the saxophone right there, and
I
Tom, maybe
do.
if you'd like to play us a tune, that would be really awesome.
Sure. Uh, Gosh, what can I play? Um, oh gosh, I can't even think right now of a tune.
Then
We
can
were
I
talking
make a
about other things.
request?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I love, hearing you play Star Trail in Alabama. Uh,
Oh
I
gosh. Well, that's
absolutely
easy.
love that tune.
Sure.
All right.
Here we go. Okay, Starsville in Alabama. go.
Oh, thank you so much, Scott,
Sure.
for that. Really, really, beautiful tune. And,
Yes.
of course, I love, Cannonball Adderley's version as well. Just
Me too.
yeah, so amazing. And yeah, maybe we can speak just a bit about your gear and equipment. And I know
Sure.
you use the synthetic reeds, right? Is that
I
the
do.
the fiber reed?
I play fiber cell right now.
Oh,
I
okay.
yeah, and yeah, I play Jody jazz mouthpieces that I
Mm,
love. Jody's been a great help to me, and my saxophones are all provided by Les Silver at a place called R.S. Berkeley. R.S.
mm,
Berkeley horns are based in New Jersey.
mm.
This guy I've known for a long time, Les Silver. He
Mm.
used to work with AMT microphones, the clip-on, wonderful
Oh,
clip-on
yeah,
microphones. I
yeah.
still have one actually. It's
Mm,
great.
yeah.
But he then started making saxophones and now he makes all band instruments. But as far as the saxophones are concerned, his endorsements now come from Joe Lovano, Wayne Shorter, Chris
Mm,
Potter, uh, a bunch of East Coast guys have all
mm,
endorsed
mm,
and play the
mm,
saxophones now.
mm,
I'm kind of his first West Coast guy, but
mm,
I love the horns, and
mm,
I couldn't recommend them highly enough. Uh,
mm,
I played a lot of horns over the years.
mm.
Um, I got a funny story actually about the mouthpiece. I don't know. I don't remember what mouthpiece I was playing. And I'll play metal mouthpieces all the time. I played them since I was in high school. But somebody came in. I came into a music store. A friend of mine who always it was also a woodwind player, and he had a lot of new equipment all the time. So I just come in there and say, "Hey, what do you got? What's new?" This was in the about 2004 or five. He says, "Well, we have this mouthpieces, these Jody Jazz mouthpieces." Oh, really? So I took one out, and so I had my alto, and this is a music store that had they taught lessons, and it was right about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon when mothers were bringing their kids in for their lesson. So there were four or five like ladies, moms, just standing around the store doing not doing waiting. And I'm over at the counter, and I take my mouthpiece and I put it on, and I play a little bit, and then I take it off, and then I put the Jody Jazz mouthpiece on, and I play a little bit. And I don't know why I did this, but I just looked around at the assembled crowd, so to speak, these women, and I said, "Does anybody have any opinions about one over the other?" They said, "We like the second one better," unanimously.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, I guess I'll play Jody Jazz Mouthpieces then.
Wow.
So again, chance. Take
Yeah.
advantage of the chances that you get in your life. And
Wow.
I don't believe in fate necessarily. What I do believe is that you can do things that put yourself in a position for good things to happen to you, which is different. You know what I mean? Try to be open. Try to make yourself available for good things to happen to you,
Mm,
and I think life will be a lot more fun if nothing else.
totally agree. Yeah. And were you affiliated with Dave Guadala? Because I know you played
Yes, yes,
saxophones,
I was.
mouthpiece.
Yeah, his story is pretty unfortunate, and he had a pretty bad demise there. But yeah, I
Mm,
played his horns for a while. I liked them. They were heavy, just weighty. They had a lot of weight to them.
mm,
Um, but I did use them. I did record on them for a period of time. But I'm just happiest with these horns right now, unless
mm.
somebody comes along with a better one. Oh gosh, please don't. I hate having to change.
Yeah.
It's like a big pain in the you know what.
Yeah. How about for synthetic reeds? Were you always, using synthetic reeds?
Yes, yes.
Mm,
Fiber cane was the first one, and my teacher. I had a teacher who owned a music store in Sherman Oaks, California, who was a
mm,
studio guy, and they just I think it was 1963. I was maybe what was I then? 15, 14, 15. He said, "Look, if you can learn to play these things, you'll be a lot better off. You won't have to worry about cane reeds all the time." So,
Mm.
what did I know? I just, okay, well, I've been playing them ever since. Not on clarinet. Clarinet's the one thing where I kind of need you kind of need a good
Mm.
cane reed. But
Mm.
saxophones, absolutely.
Yeah, and hearing you play, if no one knows particularly that you play synthetic, really, you know, we
They're not
can't,
going to know. They're not going to
yeah,
know.
can't tell. That's awesome.
But
Yeah.
that has to do with wind production, which is maybe another. I'll do a clinic sometimes, and we'll talk. Sometime we'll talk about
Mm.
that.
Yeah, for sure. And you've been doing your masterclass series as well
I have.
online,
I
which
have.
people can find. And
Yeah,
we were, yeah, I
they're on my website. I was just going to say a couple of master
yes,
classes.
and I just realized that we were talking, and I've forgotten to leave links as I mentioned
Oh yeah,
earlier.
right,
So I'm gonna put a link to Tom's website here
right.
in the comments right now. And the other thing I'm gonna put is Tom's YouTube channel. So don't
Okay,
forget to subscribe. There are currently two
please.
um, videos right there. And like Tom, like you said, it's just gonna be an incredible catalog of your experience. And I'm so glad you are doing that. And it's nice that now you're on a YouTube show as well. So I think that ties in nicely. How many videos do you think you have? That
Well,
you get.
I have two out right now. I'm planning the third right now, which is about George Harrison. I've written down, think about 25 subjects that I can talk about, just not relating to teaching saxophone or composing or arranging any of
Mm,
that. Just
mm.
stories from my life with me and other artists and other people. So if I get through all that, let's see where it goes from
Wow.
there.
25. That's really incredible. What made you want to suddenly say, okay, I'm gonna document all this down in video?
I listen. As I said, I'm 72. At this age, I sort of, and you don't know this. You'll find out this maybe later in your life that I want to leave something other than just some recordings. I want to leave some actual, maybe some insight as to how I did what I did, and the fact that it might inspire someone else or give them some, as I say, insight that they didn't have before. Uh, it's time. I think in a person's life, if you live long enough, you want to share it. Pay it forward, isn't that the phrase they use? Pay
Mm.
it forward. And
Yeah.
and you know, listen. I've done what 35 solo records, and I've got this rather large body of work. Great. I'm thrilled and proud that I was able to do it. But now it's time to kind of pass it on. Give other people some
Mm.
inspiration.
That's incredible, and I'm sure many people will be very thankful for these videos. And it's great that I don't think it will benefit just saxophonists. I think any musician or any creative, listening to those stories. And that's really why I love having this interview series as well. To really bridge that gap. From us, as musicians, as creatives. And learning from all your experiences. So
Amen.
it's
Amen.
been really
Absolutely true. Well, listen, Daniel, God bless you for doing this. I mean, it's great. It's great. You're kind of doing the same thing I'm doing with your show, trying to pass on some knowledge with all these wonderful guests you have, and that's a great thing.
yeah, really appreciate your time and sharing. And it's going to tie in and so nicely with, for all of you watching, you can carry on. There's a lot more just in that Quincy Jones video. I need to rewatch it probably a few more times to really gather, every last bit of wisdom. Like I feel I generally have quite a good memory when it comes to this style of things, like, bios and experiences, but there's just so much information.
That's
I have
okay.
to rewatch
That's
it,
okay. Well, it's
several
there.
times.
It's there when you want it. That's the beauty of
That's
it.
the amazing thing. And actually, I was looking through your website, um, and you were saying that you are actually, were you ever thinking of doing a autobiography in a book
Yeah.
form?
Yes, I was, and I try. I got about, I don't know, a third of the way done, but it just was so hard. Writing prose is not really doesn't really
Mm.
come easily to me. I thought about, do I get a writer to help me with it or what? And I thought, well, why not start with because the reason I started to write a book, because it's just sitting telling stories like I did tonight, or like I've done on my YouTube channel. People
Yeah.
would say to me, "You got to write a book." Well, why don't I start by committing the stories to just orally, just telling about them, which is the thing that made everybody want me to do it. So I
Yeah.
decided to go another way and do it this way. If that leads to a book, great. But I think I'll do the oral presentation of my
Mm.
stories first.
Yeah, yeah. Because I remember reading that on your website, so I was like, okay, that's really cool. And then when I saw you, pivot to using the video format,
Yeah.
I wanted to
Well,
ask.
I've got a lot of material in the autobiography that I will draw upon, and
Mm.
who knows where it'll go. I mean, I'll just see I'm enjoying doing these videos, though. It's fun. It's I didn't think I'd like it so much, but there must be a bit of a ham in me somewhere to want to get out there and talk to people.
No, I think it's really great. And, a lot of the guests that I asked to come on the show, so sometimes I feel like, I need to nudge them extra hard, because they have so much to share. All of you have so much to
Yeah,
share, but sometimes, we're busy with life and, all
that's
the
right.
other things, so, and it is really great. And, you didn't need much nudging, for sure,
No, no, you
and you
just wind me
started.
up and I start talking.
Oh, which is great, and I think this is something that I personally felt was lacking a lot because, of course, people know your music,
Yeah,
it's widely available, but
right.
that's just I mean, it's great,
Yeah.
but when you add on the story, with
Yeah, like who
with
is this guy? And yeah, I know. I'm the same way. I want to know who this person is. If I love their music, what does he sound like? What does he talk like? What does he care about? What is philosophy of life? And that stuff is really fascinating, I think.
yeah, like I always used to just love getting the CD and reading the liner notes.
Me too. I miss liner notes really
But
bad.
nowadays, because some people even just do a digital release,
I know.
it's on
That's what I mean.
Spotify, but then so that whole part, that whole chunk is
Yeah.
missing. So
Yeah.
it's really great that, you're doing these videos. And I think it would be nice, with the new LA Express album, accompanying videos to talk about that and it helps to promote the
I
music
I
as
I
well.
think that's probably in the wind. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, we'll definitely be looking out for it. So once
Awesome.
again, guys, don't forget to subscribe to Tom's YouTube channel, and there are a
Please.
lot of links on his website as well.
I want to
If
get
you
famous. I want to get famous on YouTube.
yeah, and he has the masterclass videos as well, which you can purchase from the masterclass. I think it's My Music Masterclass, right? The
That's
name of
right.
the company.
Yeah, and there's a
Yeah.
couple of interviews on my
Mm,
web page as well.
yeah, and
Yeah,
with
I mean, and there'll
everyone.
be more of that stuff too.
Mm, mm.
The thrust of the YouTube channel stuff is my stories, and we'll get to the education side of it as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that I'm definitely looking forward to the new album.
Thank you.
That would be pretty cool. Would this be, are you releasing it on your own or through a label?
I'm not sure. I'm not. I'm.
Okay.
That's an open question.
Okay.
I will be just having to deal with that. You know,
Mm.
the process never ends, does it? I just want to make music. Okay, no, I have to be
Mm.
now these days you got to be a promoter, a marketer. Oh my God!
Yeah,
But that's just the
yeah,
way it is. It's all right. We'll do
yeah.
it.
Cool. Definitely looking out for it no matter what. And yeah, Roxy, I think people do miss that feeling of, reading, more about, the music
Yeah,
and everybody
yeah, I
else.
think so too.
So, but
I think so too.
this is what it is now.
I know.
CD may not be here for much longer as well. I mean, even for me now, my computers have no CD, jacks.
It's
So
right. I know.
I
I've
mean,
got an
so
external. I've got it right here. This is
yeah.
my external CD
Wow.
drive.
Wow. Yeah, probably the closest place is for people who drive, like a lot of cars still currently have CDs, but yeah, I know
Right.
for one, I don't consume music that way
Yeah,
anymore. You know, but
that's the way of the future, I'm afraid. One way or the for better or
yeah,
worse. Anyway,
yeah.
it's been great
Y-
talking to you. I appreciate it
Yeah,
very much.
thank you so much, Tom. We really appreciate it. And yeah, for sure, we'll keep in touch and
Okay,
maybe do another session down the road, And yeah, we look forward to more videos from you.
I'll give you an update.
Awesome. That's
All right,
so.
Daniel.
Thank you so much. Take care. Good
Have a
night and
good
see you
day.
guys as well.
Thank you.